You're watching World Panorama, the only show that gives you news from across the globe in the most concise, direct and unbiased reports. Welcome to this week's edition with me, Sana Khan. Before we get you detailed reports, here's a look at the top stories this week. Start of a new era in Egypt as Egyptians vote for the first time to elect president. Muslim Brotherhood claims early lead. Iran nuclear talks break up without deal on nuclear stockpile. Next round of talks set for Moscow in June. India-Pakistan Home Secretaries meet in Islamabad, but terror talk derails liberal visa regime. And in sports, in a thrilling final, Nadal beats Djokovic to win 6th Italian Open title, while Sharapova finishes on top in the women's category. We begin this week's edition with a report from Egypt. In a wide-open race that will define the nation's future political course, Egyptians voted on Thursday on the second day of a landmark presidential election that will produce a successor to longtime authoritarian ruler Hosni Mubarak. The voting is being seen as a monumental achievement for those who worked to topple longtime president in one of the semi-final developments of the Arab Spring more than a year ago. And it could reverberate far beyond the country's borders, since Egypt is in many ways the center of gravity of the Arab world. To discuss the Egypt elections and the way ahead, I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Agar, West Asian expert. Thanks, sir, so much for joining me. Before we get to him, let's take a look at this detailed report. Polls opened Thursday morning in Egypt for the second and final day of voting in the country's groundbreaking presidential election, amidst worries that the armed forces would quash the results if the top brass doesn't respect the country's choice.
Anyone who is related to the Islamist movement, I stayed away from. That's because religion is supposed to be separate from politics.
It is the first time the country has had a presidential election where there were no clear leaders before the ballots were cast.
Today, the revolution continues and the Egyptian people will choose the most suitable person to represent them. Egyptian people will not allow anyone related to the old corrupt regime because they ruined the country. The Egyptian people know the remnants of the regime and they are able to differentiate between them.
Egyptians began voting freely on Wednesday to pick their president in a wide-open election that pits Islamists such as Mohammed Morsi against men who served under the deposed leader Hosni Mubarak, including Amr Musa and Ahmed Shafiq.
The result from the voting abroad shows that those who represent the revolution are in the lead.
I'm not even interested in following up the results of the voting abroad. It is not an indicator. The numbers are very small and the results are according to the candidates who visited these countries.
Official results will be announced on 29th of May, but it is likely that there will be no one candidate who will have gained a sufficient majority. A runoff, therefore, is expected, with the two candidates with the highest number of votes facing off next month on June 16th and 17th. Whoever wins faces the huge task of relieving a dire economic outlook and will also have to deal with the military establishment keen to preserve its privileges and political influence. On that note, let me get in Mr. Agar. Mr. Agar, do you feel this is a historic transformation from what we saw at Tahrir Square till now?
Yes, it is a very important development. The first time free and fair election has taken place, and a number of political parties have participated. But in the end, the movement which started for change, wanted something else. Here are the two parties which are polar parts. And large majority of people, in fact, the movement itself was opposed to both the extremes. They never wanted. The movement was, to establish a secular democratic setup in Egypt.
Right.
And here, the two parties which have come up, one is backed by the army and the other is Islamist. So I don't think, in the long run, peace will establish in Egypt.
It's quite, as you're saying, do people not have the right choice? Is that what you're saying at this point in time? On one hand, you have Muslim Brotherhood's Mohammed Morsi and former Prime Minister Ahmed Shafiq, the very same man who was thrown out by the people of Egypt with so much anger against him. He is the one who's emerging as a front runner. Now, isn't this, completely ironic?
Yeah, it looks, the Shafiq is going to win the election, which means army will back, will continue in power. The same old policies, they will continue, Or if in case, the Islamists come, the Brotherhood, Mursi comes to the power, which is difficult, it looks, In that case, their agenda would be to implement a religious program, They don't have much economic or political program as such, And there'll be another problem, I think, the problem will persist for some more time. And this pro-democracy movement will continue in Egypt, and it will take time to establish real peace in Egypt.
So do you believe one can see more, Tahrir Square, what we saw on Jan 25th that time, do you see more of that sort of an uprising coming up again if the people are perhaps not happy with the results?
You see, most of the people have already, if you look at the Twitters or the Facebook, which was responsible for this movement, the internet, they are already calling, people. They will not accept this. The problem in Egypt, because these are the people, the youth who is in majority have brought change, tried to bring change in Egypt, They don't have their own political party, they don't have their institute, because it takes much longer time to establish a political party or develop an ideology, It's just the beginning, I think it's...
So can we say this is the beginning? People are beginning to, welcome democracy at this point in time. They're just beginning to.
This is intifada, which has started, and it will take very long time to establish a real democracy, which is their aim, It's not only in Egypt. The same problem is in Tunisia. Or if you look at the other countries in the region, the Islamists are gaining support or gaining position or controlling power. Even in Jordan, the Islamists are moving because this is the oldest political, religio-political group in the entire region, the Muslim Brotherhood. Whether it is in Syria, we have seen, it's most organized, or in Tunisia, or in Algeria, they are very powerful. In Palestine, also Palestinian territories, they are very powerful. Hamas belongs to the same. Egypt, the movement was started from Egypt, and spread to the whole of North Africa and this region, even in...
That's a very crucial observation that you've made, Mr. Agar. But then what do you see the way ahead? What's the solution? It's not coming sooner, that's for sure. But how does Egypt inch towards a better tomorrow?
You see, the problem is the army is not willing to compromise. That is the whole problem, There are many people are still doubting about the election results, They say that this is, some of the groups, are accused. The army has managed it, that way. They wanted it, Many people were disqualified by the army. So it's... I think, this is the process which has started. It will take longer time. And there are possibilities, that the violence might take place because the army is not going to give up power so easily. It's a long drawn struggle which has just started years back, and will continue some more time. Not only in Egypt, but the entire Middle East, because these are the regimes, or the army-backed regimes are in power who are not willing to share power with the people, or willing to accept democratic change in these countries, whether it is Syria or whether it is Tunisia or other countries in the region.
That's quite true. If you ask a common man on the streets of Egypt, we have been reading about it and listening on various other websites. A common man in Egypt wants stability, because there's so much economic breakdown. There are other problems plaguing the country at this point in time, violent protests, so on and so forth. So it's stability that an Egyptian wants at this time, but at what cost is also a question.
You see, the entire movement, was peaceful. It was modeled on India. In fact, if you look at the Egyptian, they have already said, they brought the posters of Gandhi there. They said that they wanted to establish a liberal, secular, democratic setup like India, or Turkey also they mentioned, where Islam or religion is also prospering. So they wanted to establish same. And the entire, the beautiful movement they have built up, Tahrir Square, they remained peaceful all through, and forced Hosni Mubarak to leave the office, and then forced the Prime Minister, who's Shafiq, to resign, But
Right.
the problem is, it's still, these two people have gone, but the army has taken over. Hosni Mubarak was replaced by the army, the military council has established its power, and which is not willing to give up its
So, Mr.
power.
Agar, now Egypt is choosing their new president. They want stability at any cost. Will that stability come to Egypt or not is another question. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's edition of World Panorama. We're heading into a short break and to NATO supply route standoff at the Chicago summit or more complications. Find out the details in just a bit. Welcome back. Iran and 6 world powers achieved little in 2 days of intense nuclear talks in Baghdad, except arranging another meeting in Moscow next month and establishing they are poles apart on crucial issues. The latest diplomatic push between Iran and the P5+1, the United States, Russia, China, Britain, France and Germany, at one stage even looked unlikely to take place until desperate 11th-hour efforts managed to salvage the process for now.
Iran failed to reach agreement with the world's 6 leading powers over the most critical part of its nuclear stockpile on Thursday night after a second day of fraught negotiations in Baghdad. The talks began in Iraqi capital on Wednesday but were extended to Thursday after Iran rejected proposals put forward by the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany for persuading Tehran to roll back its uranium enrichment work.
It's clear that we both want to make progress and that there is some common ground. However, significant differences remain. Nonetheless, we do agree on the need for further discussion to expand the common ground.
The result of the talks was that we were able to get more familiar with each other's views.
The EU foreign policy chief said that the 6 world powers and Iran would move on the basis of a step-by-step plan to build each other's trust.
As we have already agreed, the talks will be based on a step-by-step approach and reciprocity. We remain determined to resolve this issue in the near term through negotiations and will continue to make every effort to that end.
Parties involved in the talks over Iran's nuclear issue decided to hold another round of talks in Moscow in June. US Secretary of State said the United States will join in talks with Iran to try to address differences with Tehran over its nuclear program.
As we lay the groundwork for these talks, we will keep up the pressure as part of our dual-track approach. All of our sanctions will remain in place and continue to move forward during this period. Iran now has the choice to make. Will it meet its international obligations and give the world confidence about its intentions or not?
At the heart of the issue are 2 different proposals. On one side is the incentive package by the 6-nation group, the US, Russia, China, Britain, France and Germany, that seeks to halt the most sensitive part of Iran's nuclear fuel production. Iran, in turn, wants the US and Europe to ease harsh economic sanctions on its oil exports in return for pledges to give wider access to UN inspectors and other concessions.
A standoff persisted between NATO and Pakistan over Islamabad's refusal to reopen supply routes to international forces in Afghanistan at the NATO summit in Chicago, which was held on May 20th and 21st. But NATO leaders said they felt confident that an agreement would be reached. The summit's final communique ratified plans for the NATO-led army to hand over command of all combat missions to Afghan forces by the middle of 2013 and for the withdrawal of the most of 130,000 foreign troops by the end of 2014.
There will still be a long and tough road ahead before Afghanistan can achieve peace and development, despite the fact that it became a big winner at the NATO summit by getting an annual military aid of $4.1 billion in the next 10 years after the withdrawal of the NATO forces in 2014.
The NATO committed to provide $4.1 billion to the security forces of Afghanistan, and this will greatly benefit the safety, stability and economic development in the country.
NATO and Afghanistan said talks with Pakistan had increased on political and military levels to reopen the supply routes, but the NATO operation in Afghanistan is not dependent on those routes.
The routes to the port of Karachi are the shortest routes to a harbour, and therefore, of course, they are routes that make logistics and redeployment easier and possibly cheaper. So therefore, of course, we have an interest in looking at these roads, but we are not dependent on them. We have alternatives that we are working with.
Barack Obama spoke briefly with Asif Ali Zardari during the summit in what may be a sign of easing tensions in the troubled relations between the two countries. But the leaders did not hold an individual meeting during the NATO summit in Chicago, as there was still no deal under which Pakistan would reopen these supply routes.
President Zardari shared with me his belief that these issues can get worked through. We didn't anticipate that the supply line issue was going to be resolved by this summit. We knew that before we arrived in Chicago. But we're actually making diligent progress on it.
While the NATO summit endorsed an exit strategy that calls for handling control of Afghanistan to its own security forces by the middle of next year, it left major questions unanswered about how to prevent a slide into chaos and a Taliban resurgence after allied troops are gone. Frustrated NATO officials have been trying to persuade Pakistan to reopen supply lines through Pakistan for NATO soldiers in Afghanistan, which Islamabad has blocked since NATO forces killed 24 Pakistani soldiers in a cross-border incident last year.
And India and Pakistan on Friday failed to ink the much-anticipated liberalized visa regime, merely agreeing to do it at an early date after Islamabad insisted on political participation. However, during the Home Secretary-level talks in Islamabad, the two sides agreed to enhance cooperation between their investigative agencies on issues of mutual concerns, including the 26/11 attacks.
Citizens of India and Pakistan will have to wait a little bit longer for a liberalized visa regime between the two countries, as the two have not been able to reach common ground on the issue. In fact, Foreign Secretary Ranjan Mathai put the ball in Pakistan's court, saying the Indian delegation to Pakistan went prepared to sign on the dotted line.
We had gone there prepared to sign this agreement in accordance with what had been decided when President Zardari and Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh had met on the 8th of April. We have also received this report that the Pakistani side referred to some delays in their procedures, as also the desire of their Interior Minister to have this at to have a political level participation at the signing. So that is where the situation is, but we had gone there fully prepared to sign this agreement.
Pakistan's Interior Minister Rehman Malik meanwhile said there were several pending issues regarding the visa agreement which have to be resolved on the political level. But he admitted that Pakistan is ready to make the visa regime more flexible.
It was discussed thoroughly, and we thought that it should be done at political level because it's something very big which is happening. In the meantime, both sides had to take some clearance from the respective authorities, and we had also submitted that paper to our authorities where in principle we have agreed, but we are working on the mechanics as to how it is to implement.
The two delegations also exchanged dossiers related to terrorism. Malik in fact told the media that India has handed over additional evidence to Pakistan against Hafiz Saeed, but he also clarified that Pakistan will not react to hearsay and that the evidence presented will have to be investigated.
They have submitted a dossier to us. We will examine that dossier. But I have demanded that if there is anything substantive, we will certainly look into it. However, no action will be taken without any evidence.
Substantive evidence, उसपे कोई action नहीं लिया.
The two delegations discussed several other issues as well. Both sides agreed that instead of blaming each other on terrorism, it was important to fight the menace together. Rehman Malik also hoped that his counterpart, Home Minister P. Chidambaram, would visit Pakistan soon.
Time for a short break now. Lots more in store. Newly elected Syria Parliament holds first session after the parliamentary elections on the 7th of May. Thanks for staying with us. Let's now take a look at some of the other international news in a quick wrap.
The newly elected Syrian parliament held its first session on Thursday. The assembly's members were sworn in at the first meeting of the newly elected assembly. Mohammad Jihad al-Laham, head of the Damascus branch of Lawyers Syndicate, was elected as the new speaker of the Syrian parliament, while Dr. Fahmi Hassan was elected as deputy speaker. On May 7th, the parliamentarian elections were carried out under the new constitution that allowed multi-party system and ended the monopoly of power by the ruling Al-Baath party. A US Senate panel has cut $33 million in aid to Pakistan in response to the jailing of a Pakistani doctor who helped the CIA find Osama bin Laden. The Senate Appropriations Committee has said it will cut US aid by $1 million for each year of Shakil Afridi's sentence. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton also said his term was unjust and unwarranted. She added that she would continue to pursue the issue with the authorities in Pakistan. Dr. Afridi was tried for treason under a tribal justice system for running a fake vaccination program to gather information for US intelligence. In a reprieve for Premier Yusuf Raza Gilani, Pakistan Parliament's Speaker on Thursday ruled out his disqualification in the wake of his conviction for attempt by the Supreme Court for refusing to revive graft cases against President Asif Ali Zardari. The Speaker decided not to send any proposal for Gilani's disqualification to the Election Commission. She said the question of Gilani's disqualification did not arise in light of the Apex Court's verdict against the Premier.
Time now to gear up for our next report. Here's all the news from the world of sports.
Spain forward David Villa will miss Euro 2012 as he struggles to recover from a broken leg. Villa fractured his tibia in December and told national coach Vicente Del Bosque on Tuesday he will not be fit for the tournament. Villa is Spain's record goal scorer with 51 goals in 82 games. Spain are also likely to be without veteran defender Carlos Puyol, who is struggling with a knee injury as they seek to defend the title they won in Vienna in 2008. Tens of thousands of Chelsea fans lined the streets of West London on Sunday to celebrate the club's Champions League triumph. Supporters saluted the team during an open-top bus parade less than 24 hours after they clinched the title. Chelsea stunned Bayern Munich in a penalty shootout in the Allianz Arena after a tension-soaked final had ended 1-1 after extra time on Saturday. Didier Drogba struck the winning king past Manuel Neuer as the visitors edged the shootout 4-3 after Bastian Schweinsteiger's last kick for Bayern had hit the post. Maria Sharapova saved a match point to beat Lina in the Italian Open final on Sunday after a 2-hour rain break effectively turned the match into a tie-break shootout. The final score was 4-6, 6-4, 7-6. Heavy rain sent the players running for covers at 6-6 in the decider shortly after the Russian had fended off a match point with a winning forehand. When they finally returned, Sharapova won the first 3 points of the tie-break. Although China's Li battled back to 4-4 and 5-5, the second seed grabbed the last 2 points for victory. Rafael Nadal enjoyed the perfect Philippe ahead of the French Open defence with a commanding 7-5, 6-3 victory over world number 1 Novak Djokovic in the delayed Rome Masters final on Monday. Nadal went immediately on the attack, carving out 2 break points in Djokovic's opening service game only for Serb's defences to dig him out of trouble. Nadal made it 5 games in a row when he moved 2-0 ahead in the second set. 2 bad bounces and a double fault on match point helped Nadal close it out and improve his career head-to-head record over the Serb to 18-14.
After all that sports action, it's time to sit back and enjoy all the very latest from showbiz in the entertainment wrap. Director Roman Polanski walked the red carpet in Cannes, joined by German actress Natasha Kinski, who starred in Polanski's Oscar-nominated film Tess. The film was shown in Cannes' Classic section. Cannes is a double feature for Polanski. The filmmaker is also the subject of American director Lauren Bonzio's documentary, a film memoir, which will be screened at this year's festival. A Jolie-less Brad Pitt arrived at the Cannes Film Festival, drawing hordes of crazed fans.
Pitt was there to promote his film Killing Them Softly, which is running a competition for the festival's top prize. Pitt took a little time at the news conference to address personal questions, saying that he and Angelina Jolie have not set a date for their wedding yet, and any stories on the contrary are merely rumors. Johnny Depp was recently taken in by the Native American Comanche Indian tribe of New Mexico, who are excited to see Depp portray the character Tonto in a reboot of The Lone Ranger. The tribe welcomed him in with a traditional ceremony, saying they were honored to have him, as they believe his life and worldview follow their ideals and traditions similarly. Depp was honored and bought gifts for everyone, as is customary. The Black Eyed Peas singer will.i.am became the 109th torchbearer as he carried the flame through the streets of Taunton in Somerset, England. Holding the torch in one hand, Will tweeted about the once-in-a-lifetime experience, saying it reminded him of his childhood. The Olympic torch is currently on a 70-day tour of the UK, ending its journey back in London for the start of the Games.
That's all from me in this edition of World Panorama. I'll see you same time next week with more world news. For now, I leave you with these breathtaking visuals of Japan's Skytree, which is now the world's tallest broadcast tower and the world's second tallest building, standing twice as high as the Eiffel Tower in Paris.